In real life relationships, you don't just get to unfriend someone because they said something that bothers you or unfollow. We're meant to stick with relationships and work things out and humble ourselves.
One of the things I love about the article that you wrote is that you talked a lot about specific women in your life who had made, and you named them, but who have really impacted you personally, like actual in-person people who have taught you things and done things with you, including your mom and your mother-in-law. And I'm the same way. My mom has taught me so many things. My mother-in-law has taught me so many things. My adopted grandmother has taught me so many things. And then just other women that God has placed in my life. And those relationships are so vitally important to us. Let's talk about that for just a little bit. And I know we already discussed this in episode 1, but I want to dig a little bit more deeply into the importance of relationships and what that looks like for us.
Well, I think, and we can talk about this like in light of social media, but here's the thing about real life relationships is they're messy and they're hard. And so much of that is used for good. God talks so much about even just conflict resolution and how we deal with difficult people and looking for the good in people. And when I compare that with social media, I think, when these real women are in my life, and it was interesting as I wrote that article, there were these women that I've now done life with for years and years. And I'm like, I'm sharing the amazing thing that they put in my life, but it wasn't without other challenges. It wasn't without other times that these women have maybe let me down or, and that's real life. And I think in real life relationships, you don't just get to unfriend someone because they said something that bothers you or unfollow. We're meant to stick with relationships and work things out and humble ourselves. And in real life relationships, we don't just get to pick the people that we have everything in common with, and with social media, it's like you just unfollow someone if you get tired of them. Like, I'm bored of this person, click, or I'm going to follow this person because they appeal to everything that I need to hear today. They make me feel good today, or the other thing is we don't need humility in online relationships because we can just shut someone down. We can just stop engaging with them if we don't like the way that it's going. And with real life relationships, it's like the nitty gritty and God uses that to sharpen us, to refine us, to humble us, to work together as his body, to put in us mercy and grace towards other people because I can't just unfollow them. And I think also the other thing about real life relationships is it's back and forth. It's give and take. There's conversation where when we have these online, when we're watching or following these influencers, there's no back and forth. We're literally just listening to them talk to us, and we either decide, do we like it or we don't? If we don't like it, we don't follow them. If we do, we follow them. And it's just such a deception of what real relationships are. It doesn't sharpen us. It doesn't grow us. It doesn't produce mercy and grace in us. And that's the beauty of real women's relationships is like with you, Yvette, I know that, if there's a disagreement or you and I don't disagree, we don't just click each other off and go find someone else to follow, right? We work through things because that's how God designed it. And that is what brings depth to relationship. It's what roots relationship. It's what grows us. And that's how we have these. That's why the list of women that I wrote, they're all still in my life one way or another, through thick, through thin, through hard, through good, because of those things, because they're real relationships.
Right. And then you learn how to be that because they're that person to you.
Yes.
And you learn how to be that to the next generation, to the women who are younger. And it will be really interesting to see. It's already interesting to see really, where relationships are going with kids today. I'm watching my girls and it's really hard for them to connect with people one-on-one. So much harder than it was when I was a teenager. And then you throw COVID on top of that and that just messed it all up.
Those poor kids.
Because they were secluded and so it's just so much more difficult for them.
Yes.
And you talk about weird and socialized homeschoolers, right? Now we just have a whole generation of weird and socialized kids.
People,
it's not so much the homeschoolers. It's just people now.
Yep. And I think honestly, it's adults too. Like Jesse. Okay, so this online thing, it's a culture. It is a culture in and of its own. So like you and I talk a lot about like the culture of where I live. It's very different than the culture of where you live. But this is where God has placed me. This is what I'm in. or even the American culture versus going overseas to another culture.
Right.
And the online world is a culture in and of its own. And what's interesting is the studies show that people are lonelier now than they've ever been, ever. That there's this epidemic, this pandemic, if you will, of loneliness that we've never seen before. And what's interesting is we have more access to more people than we have ever had in history. And yet we are the loneliest. And it's interesting because Jesse at work, he said, because my husband is not on any social media. He does not understand the culture of social media. And it's so interesting because I'll say things to him and he gives me this look like, I don't get it. Like even something funny. I'll be like, oh my gosh, this is so funny. And I'll show him and he'll look at me like, I don't get it. And it's really, it's just opened my eyes to, it's because it's a culture that you are not, like when we travel overseas or somewhere else, we don't understand everything, the humor, the this, the that, because we're not a part of that culture. And it's shown me, wow, I'm embedded in a culture that isn't necessarily good for me because it's not real. Right. And he says when on his lunch break at work, I'm like, so, how was work? And he goes, on lunch break, I sit completely and totally by myself in silence because every other person is on their phone. Nobody talks to anybody. And if you're not a part of that culture, you just sit there. Or like I shared with you the other day, my daughter went to work and when it was slow, I'm like, so did you get to know people? Did you? And she goes, no, I just sat there and it was so boring. And I'm like, well, why didn't you guys all talk? And she goes, because everybody was on their phone and they are in a different culture, part of a community that is so not real. It's fake. It truly is a fake, unreal community. And then they're having a hard time entering into the real world. And I stop and my kids, I don't think they understand what they said, but they call kids that are on their phones all the time phonies. Like they're phonies because they're always on their phone. And I thought, man, the depth of what you're saying, they really are because it's this fake. And then I think I go, it's not real. It's deceptive. And who is the king of deception? Who is a prince of lies?
Yeah.
And it's the enemy. And anywhere you go, at the bus stop, at the dinner table, at work, you go to a restaurant and everybody's on their phones. And it's a culture that I'm grateful I'm not raising my kids in, but it is a part of their reality that this is the world that they're living in. So
yeah, it's interesting. Brooklyn often will see somebody, a couple on a date in a restaurant, and both of them will be sitting on their phones, and she's like, if any guy ever took me out and sat on his phone the whole time we were at dinner, she's like, I would never ever consider going out with him again. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
It is ridiculous
because they're not getting to know each other. How do you get to know each other when you're?
I mean, you could text each other. I guess you could text each other. Just kidding.
Not the same.
No.
Homeschool Insights is sponsored by CTC Math. If you're looking for a great online math program, visit ctcmath.com and try it for free. For more great homeschool inspiration and resources, listen to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday.